Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be joined by Senator Stabenow, Kelly, and Warnock, who all worked really hard to bring forward this historic and momentous bill. We will look back on history and say this was a time when America really realized its responsibility to stay the leading economic and national security power in the world. It's a very, very significant bill. It will have effects on our children and grandchildren, and we're very proud that we have moved forward. As you know, the Senate took a major step forward on the CHIPS and Science Bill. We're calling it the CHIPS and Science Bill, after many different names. This is the final name. I don't know why.
Don't say it.
We're on track to finish the work on this bill, the CHIPS and Science Bill, before the end of the week. It's a major step forward for our economic security, our national security, our supply chains, and, as I said, America's future. I feel this bill so passionately. It's not one of these things that, people immediately say, oh, yes, we must have that done. But it is something we must have done. And I want to be clear, the proposal we're passing this week contains the majority of the key science and innovation measures that the Senate passed last summer, making historic investments in scientific research and take direct aim at our nation's chip crisis. Alongside the bipartisan infrastructure and jobs law and our present bipartisan gun safety law, among others, it is one of the most consequential bipartisan achievements of this Congress. It didn't come overnight. This has been a long time coming, but something that's so significant as this often takes a long time to come, particularly when it deals with the more arcane areas of science like quantum computing and artificial intelligence. Crucial that we stay the leading country in the world in those for our future, but not on the tip of everybody's tongue. It did, as I said, in 2019, I approached Senator Todd Young with a proposal that we called Endless Frontiers. And I said, let's work together, because I knew he cared about this. We had talked about it in the gym, about science and innovation. So we drafted the first iterations of of the policy that we're passing this week, the Endless Frontier Act. Later on, we joined with Senators Cornyn and Warner to push for the CHIPS Act as part of the NDAA to address the nation's growing chip shortage. And one of the tremendous leaders on that was Senator Kelly, who realized how important manufacturing chips in America was to the country, but also to his home state of Arizona. We all knew that America faced a choice. We could continue to underfund science and innovation, fall behind our competitors, chief among them the Chinese Communist Party, or we could tackle the challenges head-on, unleash the next wave of discovery and scientific achievement. I said to my caucus at lunch today, our grandchildren will be holding good, high-paying jobs in industries we can't even imagine because of what we are doing right now. Just as investments in DARPA and NSF created the Internet and made America the tech leader in the world, just as investments in NIH created the pharmaceutical industry, which is a leading industry in the world. This will happen because we're in 10 different areas many times over. So I really feel so passionately about this legislation. In February 2021, in the midst of the second Trump impeachment trial, I directed our chairs and members of the relevant committees to start pulling together a legislative package to outcompete China and create new American jobs, with Endless Frontiers serving at its core. We made a commitment for both sides to work together. The Senate spent 3 weeks with lots of amendments, you may remember, because it was back in 2021, June of 2021, to pass the bill with overwhelming bipartisan support. And now, a year later, the legislation we're passing this week has many of the important measures that we worked on last summer. The core of the science provisions is Endless Frontiers. For instance, last year's bill secured historic investments for science and innovation and to build new tech hubs around the country, in parts of the country, not San Francisco or Boston or Austin or New York City, but places that have a great potential to become tech hubs but haven't been able to. Places like Buffalo in upstate New York or Indianapolis in Indiana and many other cities like that. Last year's bill offered tens of billions of dollars to encourage American manufacturing and R&D in chips. This bill does that too. Last year's bill helped provide funding to build wireless communications supply chain to counter Huawei. This was a passion of Mark Warner, that we couldn't let Huawei, with Chinese government influence, be the main internet provider, the wireless communications provider of the world, and this bill deals with that as well. So it is vital. And that's why from the defense industry and intelligence industry to the science community in the universities and in the companies, all the way to the car industry and the appliance industry, so many people understood how important this bill has been. I firmly believe this bill will reawaken the spirit of discovery, innovation, and optimism that made America the envy of the world and will continue to do so. Because of these investments we are making, America will be where we make the next America will be the place where the next transformational breakthroughs in industry and science are made. Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much. This is an exciting week, and I first want to thank Senator Schumer, who really was the visionary in bringing this forward, and Senator Kelly, Senator Warnock for their efforts, so many of our colleagues who really got us to this point. Coming from Michigan, I have to say, the home of Henry Ford and the first revolution on manufacturing and industrial economy, and Thomas Edison, who was also from Michigan and created the light bulb. We are now in a position to see this next generation of exciting cutting-edge advanced manufacturing and technologies, and that's really what this is all about. I was very focused on making sure that we were making the kinds of chips needed for manufacturing, for the auto industry, for appliances, for other kinds of technology that we are making right now where we need to do that, as well as the next generation, and things we don't even know yet. As Senator Schumer was saying, we don't know. When you unleash American innovation and science, the exciting part is that we'll be back here and at some point talking about things that we can't even imagine at this point. Now, in the meantime, we're going to make sure that we are bringing jobs home, because our companies right now are competing with countries. When folks say, well, why are we doing this? Why are we going to invest working with companies to create new fabrication facilities? Well, around the globe right now, particularly in China, it's 100% government funded. Whether it is rare earth materials and batteries and electric vehicles, whether it's the fabrication facilities that, frankly, brought us to a point in a global pandemic where we couldn't get access to our chips that we need. And in fact, in the auto industry, one company in Taiwan makes over half of all the chips that are needed. And I've been saying for years, and I've had legislation saying, we need to invest in America. We need to bring these jobs home. And it finally became very clear from every angle of why we need to do that in America. And so that's what we are doing. And then we are looking to the future. We have centers for advanced manufacturing. We're going to double down on additional efforts in new kinds of centers of excellence that will create jobs. They will create scientific cutting-edge opportunities for us to move forward in new kinds of industries. So this is a big deal. This really is a big deal. And I would say that this is not the only big deal that we have passed. And I'm very proud to be part of a Senate Democratic caucus who, in the midst of a tie Senate, basically, with our great Vice President being able to cast the tie vote, we have put our heads down over and over and over again, from getting people safe vaccines, getting children to school, helping our small businesses, a huge, robust infrastructure bill that others have talked about, including the former president for years, never did anything about it. We're the ones who've done something about it. And if you look point by point by point, investing in the future for our country and investing in people and putting people first, that's what we're doing as a caucus. This bill is going to cut costs for people. It's going to bring jobs home, and it's going to strengthen our national security. And it's a big deal.
Thanks, Deb. Senator Kelly. From the great state of Arizona.
Great to see everybody today. Good afternoon. So, America, we invented the microchip. We used to produce about 40% of the worldwide capacity. Today, that number is a lot closer to 12%. And we produce 0% of the most advanced microchips in the world. And that means we depend on supply chains that are based overseas and are vulnerable to disruption. Now, if you've waited for a new car recently, or paid more than you expected, or even paid more for a used car, it's most likely because of a microchip shortage. But we're about to change that. So over a year ago, Senators Warner, Young, Cornyn, and I started hammering out an agreement to fund the Chips for America Act and bring microchip manufacturing back to the United States. And it's taken a lot of work to get there, but we're finally going to get this done tomorrow. And here's what it means. It means lower costs for everyday products that depend on microchips. It means we can stay ahead of China and that we won't rely on them or other countries for our microchip supply. And finally, it means tens of thousands of jobs in places like Arizona, which is already becoming a hub for microchip manufacturing. Now, Intel has announced a big expansion in Chandler, Arizona, and the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company has broken ground on their first American facility in North Phoenix. I visited the facility just a couple weeks ago. And that fab, that first one, is going to produce the most advanced microchip ever made in the United States. And these investments are only made possible by this legislation. And because we were able to also add our Bipartisan Fabs Act, we will continue to attract this type of investment in the United States in years and decades to come. So this is really just the beginning. This is incredibly important, but also incredibly exciting for our country and for the state of Arizona. Thank you.
Senator Warnock from the great state of Georgia.
Thank you so very much. And first I want to thank Senator Schumer for his leadership on many things, but certainly on this CHIPS and Science legislation, of which he is the lead sponsor. Let's be very clear. Congress cannot allow Georgia or our country to miss this opportunity to invest in American jobs, American manufacturing, and American innovation. We cannot miss this moment to invest in our future. This targeted competition bill is the product of more than a year of bicameral, bipartisan work. You've heard my colleagues speak powerfully about the many ways this legislation will indeed move our economy forward and keep us competitive against global actors like the Chinese Communist Party. But I want to talk about the human face of this public policy, because what I don't want to get lost in all of this is that this is about more than investments in chips. Investments in chips and investments in science, at the end of the day, is about investments in our people. By creating and supporting good-paying jobs, by strengthening broken supply chains and driving down costs that Georgians are facing right now on the ground, and by training our young people and the workforce that we'll need for the economy we'll actually have in the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next 30 years. So as we pass this bill, what I'm thinking about right now is the people of Georgia. And sometimes in the back and forth here in Washington, D.C., that gets lost. I'm thinking about the 2,700 workers at the Kia plant in West Point, Georgia, where they make the most popular SUV in the country. That plant had to shut down a couple of times, not because of a lack of customers, but because of a lack of chips. And so because of this legislation, the workers down at the Kia plant in West Point, Georgia, won't have to worry about missing days off work and missing money out of their paycheck because we don't have enough chips for the cars they make right here in America. Because we're going to make more of those chips right here on American soil. And so I was glad to stand with my colleagues in Michigan, Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters, focused on chips with respect to the automobile industry here in this country. I'm thinking also about the 400 jobs in the new chip supply plant that's being built right now in Newton County, Georgia, that will be supported by investments in this bill. I'm thinking also of rural broadband providers in my state like the Planters Telephone Cooperative in Scriven County, who need chips for the equipment they use to connect new homes and new businesses to the internet in the rural communities they serve. So this bill will also help in our work with expanding rural broadband. Farmers in Georgia tell me all the time, you can't even farm efficiently without a broadband connection. And the Planters Telephone Cooperative has been, in a real sense, handicapped by the lack of chips. But I'm also thinking about schools like Savannah State University, Columbus State, Middle Georgia State University, schools that have been punching way above their weight for a long time. They will now have greater access to research dollars from the federal government that will create new jobs and, again, train the workforce of our future. There's so much in this bill for Georgia and for our country. So I say to my friends on both sides of the aisle, I'm glad that we are here, but let's quickly get this bill over the finish line. Let's get it to the president's desk, and let's get it signed. There's a reason why the 20th century was the American century. In large measure, it was because of our investment in science, in innovation and technology. And this bill is about making sure that the 21st century, like the 20th century, is the American century.
Thank you. Well said. Just two other points I'd make. I do want to thank, I believe we had 17 Republicans vote for this proposal today, and that shows you how bipartisan this is. And second, you know, our government and our businesses are often accused of just being too short-term. This is one of the few bills where we're really thinking in the long term. Yes.
Are you supportive of the Electoral Count Act legislation that Collins initiated?
Look, I haven't read it yet, but I know I respect their efforts. We need to do something. Senator Klobuchar is having a hearing on it very soon, and hopefully we can move forward on a proposal. Yes.
The Marriage Equality Act passed the House. Is it still a priority to get that
Yes.
to the floor before the recess?
Well,
and secondly, critics have said that it doesn't have conscious protections or could open up the door to polygamy.
okay. The bottom line is that we care very much about the Equality Act, the Marriage Equality Act. We are working real hard to get 10 Republican senators. Between that and the illnesses, we're not there yet. Yes.
Your cannabis bill is for the Judiciary Committee today here. Talk to us about some of the concerns that opponents have. In Canada, it showed that after they legalized this, there were increases in visits to emergency rooms. In states where they've legalized it, they've had issues there. You know, defend
The overwhelming evidence from the states that have legalized cannabis is there has not been an increase in crime and has not been an increase in drug use. I think it makes a great deal of sense to do it. Yes.
Yes, Schumer, if the House approves a bill, self-executing bill offering Puerto Rico statehood, independence, and free association, do you expect any action in the Senate in the floor?
Well, right now, the three things we're focusing on in this work period, as you know, are CHIPS, reconciliation, and the PACT Act. Yes, go ahead.
How did the bird bath go on Thursday? Are there any setbacks, and are you ready to bring the reconciliation package to the floor next week?
Right. We had the full bird bath Thursday. It's often people forget there are 3 steps to the bird bath. First, the proponents, in this case Democrats, bring their proposal before the parliamentarian and ask her thoughts and try to get a feel for it. Then the Republicans see what it is and say, well, here's what we think. But the official bird bath occurs when it's like a judicial proceeding almost. Democrats and Republicans are in the room with the parliamentarian. They argue whether this should be allowed under the reconciliation process. And that happened Thursday. We're awaiting her rulings. We're optimistic that they will be good. We may have to make a few tweaks. We're waiting to see what she says. Yes?
You've been a hawk on China for years. I just wonder what you make of the concern that's coming from the administration about Speaker Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. Would you go yourself? Do you support her?
Well, to me, a long-distance trip is Buffalo, so I don't do that much traveling. But I have great faith in Speaker Pelosi, and I have great faith in the decision that she will make. Yes. You. Yes.
Just follow up on the Marriage Equality Act. When you say you're not at 10 yet, has the number changed?
I'm not. I'm not going to get into any specific numbers. We have people who are doing counting and working hard to try and get it done. Burgess.
Do you believe President Biden should run for a second term?
I have said if he runs, I'll support him. Yes.
Can I ask you on chips, how long do you think Silver
Well, if we finally got a question on chips, this great important bill.
How long do you think it'll take to actually get new fabs under production as a result of it?
Look, there's a huge demand for chips, as Mark Kelly and Raphael Warnock and Debbie Stabenow can tell you. And I think the chip companies, once this bill passes, are going to try to move really, really fast. There's lots of different inquiries going around. Last one.
Leader Schumer, Republicans say that regardless of if the economic numbers that come out on Thursday indicate that we are officially in a recession, that it feels like a recession to so many Americans. So how do Democrats respond and react to that?
Two things. Number one, there are a lot of good things in this economy. Record job creation, more money in people's pockets than they've had before, and something that we have decried in this country for 20 years, low wage growth, is now growing at a rapid rate. Those are all very good things that make people's lives a lot better. On the issue of inflation, we Democrats are working very hard to curb it. This bill, dealing with supply chains, dealing with the chip shortage, you heard what Raphael and Mark said about car prices going up. We'll deal with it. Our prescription drug bill, one of the great costs that people face are the increased costs of prescription drugs. We will deal with that. And so we're dealing with people's costs and believe that the public will see that we are on the side of reducing costs and getting inflation lower. Thank you, everybody.
Antitrust bill